Hi everyone. I was asked by someone at club to do a bit of a tutorial as to how I cut body shells. Obviously usual caveats apply. I'm not an A finalist and it's probably not the best way to do it, but it's a way to do it and it seems to work for me. And seeing as, well, as you can see this one's a bit chewed up now, I thought I'd get on with it. So I'll show you, these are the tools I use. It's fairly basic. We've got a Sharpie, curved scissors, your standard compass cutters. I use this Huddy hole reamer just because I have a Huddy one, but I quite like the fact it's got a really shallow angle, so it bores quite quickly and easily, which I prefer. And these things, now Protoform sell these under what's called, I think they call it crosshair. These are, I think I got them off Zen Racing. They're a bit cheaper. These are my secret, really, and I'll show you how they go on the car. So if I bring that over, so as you can see, they just sit. Focus. If I bring that in the middle, there we go. So they just sit on top of the body posts, and they clip on with, annoyingly, those are the only body clips that work with. Those are those annoying, tiny, thin wire ones. Yeah, so they sit there, and then what happens is there's a little magnet, and then once you get the body shell placed over, sort of roughly, the magnet snaps in place, and then you can sort of, it kind of holds it enough that you can sort of move it around and it won't move an awful lot, and that's what lets you get things positioned nice and square and central before marking off and then cutting the holes. Right, okay, by the magic of television, apologies for the horn in the last bit, but is what it is. Anyway, so there's the new body shell. I've put these little magnetic things on top of the body posts of my LMP here, and literally all I do is plop it roughly on and then snap these little magnets on one by one. So, trouble is, these magnets like to stick to each other. So literally, they just fly into place quite handily. Go on. A certain amount of finding of it. Aha. Right. So, now that's in place roughly, we can have a quick look. So, next step is, or at least for me, is I have a look at the side of the car, and, well, as you can see, this one's quite far forward over where I'd ideally want it. So what I then do is shuffle it back and forth until I can get things lined up. I pre-spray the shells before cutting them. I know some people cut them clear and then spray them. I just prefer to do it this way, but what I do is leave a little bit of tape there, because it means you just can see where the wheel arches and the wheels are and so forth. And there we have things a little bit more in line, and the same at the rear, although it's always a little bit more difficult to figure out where the rear wheel arches are for some reason. I've also marked out the line on this. I'll show you how I did that. It's not that difficult, but basically just to help me. But what I do now is I basically hold it up to the light and start trying to see where the car is left to right inside the chassis, and is it twisted or is there anything going on. So do that and try and sort of work out. Yeah, it needs to go over a little bit. As you can see, it's right up against it there, and there's a little bit of a gap there, so I'll sort of shuffle it around until everything looks as square and as neat as possible, and then I mark it. Okay, once again, magic of television. Little bit of shuffling back and forth until we worked out where things sort of sat centrally, but basically, yeah, you need it sort of central in the car and roughly in line with where you want the front wheel arches to be, which I normally try and put inside the little ring, but I know some people like to go 1 mil forward or 2 mil forward or so on and so forth. And then literally I mark it out. Now in theory those holes in the middle there are big enough that you can get a pen in. In practice I never can, so all I do is just come in and just judge it by eye, put a little mark diametrically top and bottom, and I make myself a little cross like that. Now obviously I'm normally a bit neater than this, but it's hard to do it while you're holding a camera and a pen and it's all floating around. But basically, yeah, I just go through making sure one by one, try not to move the magnets, that I've got something. And basically what you want is you want a line. I try and get a line going through the middle of it, and then a position that marks where the center will be on that line, so that when I take the magnet off I can go, right, it's going to be in line with that, it's going to be in line with that, and I get a point about there that I can then start my hole in. There is a certain amount of judgment involved, because the back ones are normally quite flat and they're normally pretty exactly where it is. The front ones, where this is a slope, you kind of have to make a bit of a, because the hole's not going to be round, it's going to be oval, so you have to make a bit of a guess and adjust it a little bit. But I tend to find just playing it by ear and sort of using a bit of experience works there. But I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so there we are all marked up. You can see I've just put the little dots in there, and then again at the back, although I've realised now that I've done that wonderful thing of using a red pen on red paint, which I can see but you might not be able to. But basically from here I use the borer, and what I tend to do is make a sort of a 2 mil hole, quite a small one, just to sort of try and see where I am on the body posts when I place it in, and then I can adjust from there, and I just go very slowly from there. Alright. Okay, so here we are. So what I've done is I've bored a little, the 2 mil little sort of pilot holes in the back and the front, like that, about that size. And I've just put the magnets on the back, having checked that the rear holes line up, which they did. I've then put the magnets back on just to keep that back end in place while I have a look at the front. And essentially I've left the bottom parts of these post holes in place, and you can use that to correct. So in there you can see I'm a little bit too far to the left on that one, so I can bear that in mind when widening the hole and use that to correct myself. That one, however, looks either spot on or awful. Yeah, so just tweak it and look around. Yeah, so that one's pretty spot on. And then essentially it's a case of softly, gently widen the holes until they just slip over loosely, but not too loosely, to a point, over the holes. And then, and at some point as well, I remove at a point sort of after this, I sort of remove the magnet holders and then use the body posts themselves. And then go through. The only other thing to bear in mind is the front here. So to go in and start your hole, you have to kind of go in square like that. But very quickly you can, especially if it's sharp, you can bring that up vertically, which will give you the sort of the oval shaped hole you need. So that does help, because your body posts are obviously going to come up vertically, which is at an angle to the actual body shell. Alright, back in a minute. And there we are, 4 body posts neatly cut. Right, so next step is get them body clips on the shell so that it's actually mounted to the car. I've put them quite close because we like things nice and close for this, although I run looser in racing. But essentially what we want to do now is get a horizontal line on the shell once it's on the car. So we make sure that's sitting on its wheels, which it is, which is quite handy. And then we want to mark a line. There are special pens to let you do this. This is Bitty Designs one. The idea is you put it on that block and it slides along, and that one's 8 mil, that's 6 mil, 7 mil, etc. Never worked out whether that was 6 or 9, to be honest. To be honest, for 12th cars, quite conveniently and quite handily, Sharpie is exactly the right height. So just get it on your nice flat surface, put your Sharpie down, make sure you hold it against it, apply tip to Bodyshell and draw your line. I actually already did this one because I'm cheating. But yeah, basically you go all the way around and cut that out, and then we mark the wheel arches. In terms of going all the way around and cutting it out, I tend to use the curved scissors to do the straight lines as well, because I find it easier. Insert joke here, haha. But yeah, every time I've used the straight scissors, I tend to make a mess of it. I've even known some people use Stanley knives and straight edges and things like that. Whatever works for you, use it. But yeah, that's basically it. So there we are. As you can see, it's a reasonable distance off, and it's enough that even when you push it all the way down, it's not actually scraping on the ground. And the same on the rear, which is quite good. Now we mark out the wheel arches, which I tend to do front first. You'll have to bear with me because I've actually done this one already. But essentially, I used the bit where I very cleverly put masking tape while I was painting it. I mark where the centre of the screw is, having checked that the wheels are straight, of course, and then roughly where the limits of the wheel are, using, if I can, any sunlight to kind of, yeah, you can just about see the shadow of the wheel there, just through the shell, and that, so I mark where the rough extent of the wheel is, and then I check it left and right to make sure it's roughly the same. Hopefully it is. If it isn't, it's probably a twist in the body shell at this stage, but always worth checking. It's also worth checking you're on the same holes and so on with the body clips, because sometimes that can make things a bit odd. And then I do the same on the rear. Obviously there's a bit of a parallax issue with the centre of the wheel on the rear. And then essentially use the compass cutters to cut out your wheel arches. Obviously within 10mm, I think it is, of where the tyre is. The only thing to be careful of with this is that obviously with your suspension travel, your wheel does move up. So sometimes it is worth just checking that to make sure that you're not going to be going straight up into it and things like that, to make sure that you, because sometimes, especially when you're marking up and the pod gets twisted and it's sort of, the pod's like this, and then you cut your wheel arch out and you realise that this wheel arch is really high and this one's really low. So yeah, just keep an eye on that. But yeah, so give me a minute and I will cut them out and you can see what it looks like. And there we go, all cut out. As you can see, it looks a little bit sharp on these corners, and when you push down, the wheels are not pushing into the wheel arches, so your tyres aren't getting shredded. So literally all I do now is I round these off, and I grab a little bit of sandpaper and run down the edges and make sure everything's nice and smooth. Oh, and I cut out the back. But that I literally just do with the scissors. And then that's it, basically. Slap the numbers on, get the battery in and take it out racing. Thanks very much, guys. Hopefully that helps some of you. Yeah, that's basically it. The key to it is take it methodically, double check everything, measure twice, cut once. Oh, and also the trick to neat holes is do that pilot hole, figure out where you are actually, and then you can sort of use like pressure on one side of the borer, and it will then bore a slightly oval hole, which you can then enlarge to be around one with the centre effectively where you should have put it in the first place. But yeah, that's basically it. Hope that helps. Thanks very much. Bye.